Awesome. Well, we're going to kick things off with a little icebreaker. Deanna, no pun intended. And over at Poly, they actually call it a hot take. And I'll pass this one over to you, Deanna.
All right. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, over at Poly, we like to do our own hot takes. Some can get a little bit spicy, but these are statements intended to spur discussion. There's no right or wrong answer. So this hot take, soda tastes better poured over ice than from a can. We did this one last Friday in our random channel just for fun. And we wanted to share this one today. And you can see here from the results, some members of our flock have some passionate opinions about being on team ice or team no ice. And I am team ice here.
Team Ice. I'm going to go the other route. I'm going to say straight from a can. And what about, oh, I see. Okay, we've got a lot of people.
Some ice here in the chat.
Okay, I think a lot of Team Ice. I feel like a lot of people on your side on this one. No ice, frosted mug. Okay, that's another option.
A soft drink, a soda, pop. Yeah.
Coca-Cola bottle. Nice. Neither. Don't drink any. Yeah, fair enough.
There.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's a great example of a nice poll there. Very, very opinionated question there. Awesome. So I thought it would also be good to start with another icebreaker here. What's something that has made remote working easier for you? Perhaps if you guys can continue on and populate some chat here, and let's see what's made easier for you guys. 5 seconds. Yeah. Zoom. Yeah, Zoom has certainly made things easier. Teams. Seems like commuting is a hot one, and individuals love the pajama pants. Yeah. That's some, so I see the half work attire there. Yeah, and I know for me, one of the things that I enjoy is spending more time with my family. I love that my kids can hear and watch me work. Deanna, how about yourself?
Yeah, same. It's no commute. I like that. Nice desk setup, got the dual monitors, the lighting helps a little. I still do look forward to times when we can get together though, off sites when we can.
100%. Awesome. Very active group here. Totally appreciate that. Thanks, everyone. Cool. So this session, today's webinar, is presented to you by Bucket List Rewards, the #1 employee recognition platform, and our guest, Polly, in the business of instant engagement for your digital HQ. Our speakers today, Deanna. Deanna leads the people function at Poly, while also leaning in on the go-to-market, product, and engineering teams with operational support. Formerly in the legal industry, she focuses on bringing authenticity and connection to the workplace and asks a lot of questions. Deanna is a big soccer fan and a mom of 10-year-old twins who also ask a lot of questions. And for myself, I'm a culture evangelist at Bucket List Rewards with 12 plus years of marketing and advertising experience. I'm a strong advocate for employee rewards and recognition and loves cultures built around fun and being yourself. By night, I'm a dad bod father of 3 who loves playing sports, specifically hockey. I saw some football chat coming in there, but I'm going to throw out a go Leafs.
Yeah.
And for those football fans, I'll say go Bills. Just recently, I started my own draft style ice hockey league. And when I'm not playing hockey or spending time with my family, you can likely find me playing darts or playing board games from my collection, over 140, as I'm sure you can see somewhere in the background here. I see some hockey love coming in. Yeah, I don't even know. I'm located in Canada, just south of Toronto. Deanna, share where you're from.
Yeah, I'm in Denver.
Nice. I've seen some Denver comments in there.
Yeah.
And just to quickly touch on the agenda for this session, we'll have a group discussion. What does remote leadership mean to you? The state of remote leadership. Is the remote office really running smoothly? And we'll get towards the end here. We'll have a fireside chat, strategies for improving communication and connection in a distributed world. Before we get into the group discussion about remote leadership, let's talk a little bit about remote work and how it can look different from in-office work. The other day, I saw this post on LinkedIn and I thought it was great. I'm a big fan of having fun, and certainly this group here was doing that. But dress code isn't the only thing that's changed due to remote work. And at Bucket List, we have a traveling nomad who's always logging in from different parts of the world, and a colleague who's often working remote from his boat. We have
Nice.
defined core hours. Yeah, not a bad problem to be logging in from your boat for a meeting, eh? And there, I threw in the A there because it just comes out naturally. We have defined core hours, and people have the freedom to structure the rest of their day accordingly. We take into consideration how people work best. It's important to empower the individual and trust everyone to do their part. But I'm curious to know how many of you today are listening in remote. Perhaps if you can throw it in the chat there. Are you joining us today in office, or are you in your bunny slippers? And Deanna, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about Polly's distributed team functions while we see the chat light up here.
Yeah, for sure. So Poly is fully remote. We're a distributed team. We have folks in 3 countries, different time zones. We've actually been fully remote since 2014. I think there was a time back in the day we did have an office in Seattle where a concentration of folks are located. And then we've had an occasion to have a shared office space now and again. And we got together, we had an offsite back in May where some of us got to meet in real life for the first time. So that was great. So we try to get together annually, if not more.
That's awesome. And I see it looks like a lot of people are calling in remote today in their PJs and bunny slippers. I've seen a couple people comment about bunny slippers. Nice. Bucket List has gone through many changes over the past few years, as we've also transitioned into a fully remote company. Now Bucket List is distributed, but pre-pandemic, we used to have an office and the team went in 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. But once the pandemic and lockdown started, we needed to move our operations online. And since then, all subsequent hires have been remote, including myself. And just to quickly touch on remote, Deanna and I both have puppies. So at any moment, we may have to mute. Part of the fun of working from home, having our fur babies with us all the time. But now at Bucket List, we're a 45 plus person team and growing, working from 7 different time zones. A few team members who are originally local to our head office in Vancouver have since moved to other parts of the world. Leading remotely can be challenging as we adapt to new circumstances. And on the screen here, you can see some thoughts from 2 Bucket List leaders on their experiences leading remotely. Some of the benefits we've seen, the decision to stay distributed, even as the world opened up, due to the team's preference. Our internal survey showed that only 33% wanted the option to work from an office on a regular basis, while 52% said they would be interested in going into an office once or maybe a few times per week. We've introduced membership to co-working spaces that are local to the individuals where majority of our staff are. And the ability to work remotely is a big value proposition for our team and potential candidates. They've enjoyed and shared that they've enjoyed the increased flexibility, the productivity, the work-life balance that comes with this work model. They also enjoyed the lack of a stressful commute. And I think I saw a couple individuals comment about the lack of commute or the 30-second commute to your computer. And, that saves time, right? That's not time on the road anymore. It's time spent at home and maybe with family and friends. And not to mention, working remote involves trust and gives the employees a sense of empowerment. And just to quickly touch on Katie's comment here, at Bucket List, it wasn't an easy process for us. Even now we're still tweaking what it means to be distributed, but we're always looking for ways to improve our processes and our culture. It's group discussion time. All right. In your experience, that's everyone here, how is remote distributed leadership different from traditional in-office leadership? You can just fire away in the chat. I warned you guys, I said we're going to be using the chat feature quite a bit today. And Deanna, perhaps while individuals are typing out their responses, what is your experience with remote versus in-office leadership?
Yeah, it is very different. I've done both. I spent a prior life practicing law, appearing in court, doing a lot of stuff in person in office. You have to be a lot more intentional and deliberate, thoughtful around communication remotely. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I think getting and giving feedback is a lot different in a remote world. Again, there's this intentional component that's necessary there. Those are some big things that I really notice.
Awesome. Yeah, and I see a lot of great things coming here in the chat as well. Again, everyone totally appreciate the engagement here. If we see that there's a lot of responses here, and if you think it's all valuable, we can put together a resource after the webinar and share it with everyone. Just kind of plucking out some of these key comments here. What type of comments do we have here? Yeah, it requires more technology. Lot of great responses here. Anything stand out for you, Deanna?
Yeah, communication, making your communication more direct.
Feedback. Yeah, awesome. Perfect. We're going to continue on here. And I'm going to pass this over to you, Deanna.
Sure. All right. The state of remote leadership. So is the remote office really running smoothly? This was a question we had at Poly, and we wanted to find out what others really thought about this question and how they would gauge their own experience. However, we knew we couldn't just use remote leaders or remote managers. So we also wanted to do a simultaneous process to ask remote teams or remote workers. So we really set out to determine things that were going on in a remote distributed workplace and if things were actually really running smoothly. So around this time last year, we actually conducted a survey to check the pulse on remote meetings. This year at Poly, we decided to focus more on the behavioral aspects of remote work. So we wanted to learn more about how remote managers thought about changes in management style in a remote setting, but also compare that with thoughts and perceptions of remote workers. So we set out on this path and conducted 2 simultaneous surveys. This was in July and August of 2022, so a couple of months ago. So we surveyed 1,000 remote managers and 1,000 remote workers who report to remote managers. We aimed at asking a lot of questions about connection, cohesion, and trust. You'll hear those words a lot in the next few slides, and what that really meant in the remote workplace. We really wanted to know, sorry about that. We wanted to know how they were managing day to day and what challenges they faced. And ultimately, we wanted to get to the core of how to identify some of these weak spots and then help leaders implement strategies to better drive engagement and positively impact communication and connection in their teams and in their organization. So a few key survey findings here. It really shed a lot of light on the dynamics at play between remote managers and their direct reports. So we did identify a few recurring themes here around trust and cohesiveness. So I'll tackle these here. First, both remote managers and workers agreed that the use of more communication tools was a necessity. Many expressed an overall satisfaction with what they do have in place, existing tools and resources. Next, a theme of trust in the workplace, which I thought was really interesting, came up quite a bit and struck a chord with many workers who were surveyed. So we'll cover trust a bit more in depth later. But this was a challenge we saw come up in various ways, and perhaps one that maybe a lot of leaders see as a bit of a broad concept at first glance. So we'll kind of dig a little deeper in that to provide some perspective there. And then finally, in a similar vein, remote workers surveyed thought additional tools and forms of communication would help to increase trust and overall productivity in a remote workplace. I will also mention too that our marketing team is finalizing our report on our survey. So we will share that to all attendees in a follow-up email as well.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's dive into some of these stats. So these 3 stats really focus on the challenges of remote workers. Again, we surveyed 1,000 individuals, and these are the most identified challenges: developing trust with coworkers, leaders, and receiving recognition for the work that they do.
And how do you make appreciation and recognition part of Poly?
Yeah, it's an ongoing process, a work in progress, I guess, so to say. We're not perfect at it, and it's kind of a moving target sometimes. I think other organizations and leaders can relate to that as well. Um, but we've tried several things over time. We do have a Slack channel. It's called Inspired by Good. Inspiring good is one of our values at Poly. And we really focus on building mutual respect, being open-minded, cultivating a safe environment for the team. And this is a channel we just use to give shout outs for thank yous, job well done, show credit where credit is due, a lot of good memes back and forth. It's just a way for us to show appreciation and recognition really anytime for anything.
Yeah, big fan of that.
Yeah. Nice. I'll probably put one in after this to thank all those that helped me in preparation for today. So yeah, when it comes to building trust, let's kind of go back to trust here for a bit with coworkers and leadership. It's also an ongoing process. I think in nearly any setting, when people lose their trust, it can inevitably affect operations, and companies can see a dip in productivity. I think one of the most important things I'd like leaders in a remote environment to take away from today's presentation is to encourage them to have a strategy or establish a process or a routine toward that consistent communication. Consistency here is key. And trust comes in many forms across industries. That can be having open lines of communication, encouraging others to share thoughts, making appreciation and recognition part of your team and your corporate culture. Being open to sharing as a leader your own mistakes, your own failures, your own lesson learned, kind of having that vulnerability moment. And then just continuously cultivating this by being consistent, being positive, and creating spaces to engage. So I think I'll drop into, we'll go over this too a little bit, but I think it's important to know that this doesn't have to all be serious talk. Having some spontaneity and lightness are just as crucial, just like the hot take at the top of the webinar. It's not always one-on-one video, having more of a layered approach here and having a variety of tools and strategies in place.
Love it. And I hear your puppy's enjoying the webinar as well, Deanna.
Of course, never fails.
Fur puppies for the win.
Okay, so let's move to more of the employee manager dynamic. This is a really interesting point, and even in preparation for this, when Aaron and I were talking about this, he kind of highlighted some things for me as well. So these two stats were really striking in the sense that they're not always obvious, but it was clear that many people noticed a disconnect here. So there's two parts here. I want to break them down a little bit. So 43% of remote workers say that managers are missing subtle cues. Subtle cues meaning how someone's doing, how they're receiving a message, how they're communicating to others, emotional well-being, do they have something going on that day, something like that. And then 58% of remote workers also say they would like to get quicker feedback on their work. So receiving quicker feedback on presentations, meetings, projects, maybe it's a roadmap draft that they submitted and they're awaiting edits, maybe it's a contract. So let me start with the subtle cues. I think one of my biggest learnings as a remote manager has come through missing some of these subtle cues or signals that I might have picked up on in an in-office setting. In office, you can pick up on body language, mood. I think someone mentioned that even in the chat as well, but you can get more of a sense for how someone's feeling. Maybe you go grab coffee with them, you go grab lunch. But in a remote setting, it's so easy to miss these subtle clues. And it's even harder to evaluate what's the scale or the degree of how this person is feeling. Is this stress building from a stress perspective? Will it impact their work? How are they really feeling about that project? What can you do as a manager to help either alleviate some of that stress or tension? Maybe even it's just maybe a time to talk it out. So I think the nuance in missing subtle clues is that people will still tend to perform well, but over time, it can be a big stressor for this person. So if something's mentioned again and again, it's a signal to a manager to maybe dive a little bit deeper on that. So our CEO mentions the doorknob question. Do you know what the doorknob question is?
I have a clue as to what it is. Yeah, but it was the first time I heard it. So
Okay, yeah. So our CEO, his brother's a doctor, and when he sees patients, he always says that the most important question, the most telling question, is the one the patient asks right before he's reaching for the door handle, or the doorknob to leave the room. So I think that's pretty telling and transferable in a lot of one-on-one contexts. That last question before you're about to end the call can be pretty telling. So let me jump into feedback here. I think another big learning I've seen play out in real life is the struggle to provide quicker feedback. So again, in an in-office setting, you're in the same room with folks. Maybe you're going out to lunch after a big meeting. You can get a gut sense for how things are and do kind of a debrief and talk things out. Maybe you stood in the doorway of a colleague and you just got their fresh thoughts on how that particular sales pitch went or the town hall meeting was. Maybe they have a thought or idea on how to improve, or maybe they picked up on something from the audience that you didn't see at the time. It's challenging if you layer that in a remote workplace. People are going from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom. There's no crucial post-meeting time for that instant feedback. So sometimes some of those feedback times or subtle cues are just lost to time and memory, or I'm sorry, yeah, memory, time, and just back-to-back scheduling, which can be crucial. So I think the takeaway here is, if you're not always with a person to pick up, on subtle cues or provide that feedback, you're really losing that moment to connect and potentially resolve a pressing issue or a source of tension or stress. So you have to replace that signal in some way in a remote setting. So a way to measure this dynamic, so you as a manager are working with more information, and you're also better equipping your direct reports. These areas, these subtle cues and quicker feedback are two key areas, we try to solve for. So we'll include some suggested strategies to really battle this communication disconnect later in the presentation.
yeah, thanks for sharing all that. We talked a lot about the subtle cues when we were chatting leading up to this webinar. And, as an employee and working in other organizations, I can say from experience that in a remote environment, managers miss a lot of subtle cues. And
Yeah.
I really love the doorknob analogy, by the way.
Yeah, okay. So I've got 3 more stats here for you. I know we've covered a lot of aspects of the manager-employee relationship, but I really want to go over a few manager-specific responses that really stood out. These were the top 3 challenges managers identified. So providing regular feedback, feeling connected to direct reports, and about half indicated they wanted a way to quickly assess emotional well-being of their team. So many managers are in this ongoing dialogue with direct reports about a variety of work items, whether it's Slack, Teams, Docs, email, whatever it may be. The recurring theme for challenges managers identified is how to communicate in ways to provide regular feedback, build connection, and assess well-being. And it's difficult to do that under these traditional channels that you're typically using for work. It's also important to remember here that these touches, these communication points with direct reports can come in a variety of shapes and sizes, and it's not always super serious or super structured. So I have a couple tips here for managers to keep in mind. Incorporating spontaneity and lightness. We spoke about that a little bit. Mixing in the serious and the fun. Having an element of lightness is also important. I think there's definitely tools, including Poly, out there for a way to automate some of this, so it takes it out of your immediate to-do list. on automating check-ins in the morning. Maybe it's even on a weekly basis, scheduling feedback after meetings. Even if feedback is just typing a few sentences or answering a few questions. And then, mixing in that fun and that lightness too. There's other passive touches or engagement touches like the hot takes, trivia, icebreakers, kind of like we did at the top of the webinar here. I think this overall encourages, multi-level communication within the organization, bonding experiences, and then it opens lines of communication.
I love it. And perhaps maybe in the chat here, if individuals can even type some examples of challenges that they faced while managing remotely. I'm a big fan of icebreakers. I love the small chit chats before and after meetings. Oftentimes I find that's when I'm learning a lot about the people, about who they are and some of the things they enjoy doing, right? It's important to connect with people on a personal level as well. I see some comments here about Slack. Yeah, Slack's fun. I'm a big fan of actually I like customizing the little emojis for our team. So if someone's got a nickname within bucket list, I make little emojis for them so that anytime we give them a shout out, they've got their own personal emoji. That's always fun.
Yeah, nice. We're big on emojis as well.
And GIFs.
Yeah.
Let's see, check-ins, checkouts. That's nice. Perfect. All right. We'll continue on here.
Okay. All right. So what is working smoothly in the remote work environment? So we did find ultimately here that managers and workers agree that frequent check-ins and using a variety of communication tools are positively impacting their experience. So we did see that 60% of workers agree better communication tools would help them feel connected. And 68% of managers say they want more frequent contact with their direct reports. So again, a good reminder here is this doesn't always mean, one-on-one or video calls. It's touch points, communication touch points. It can be active, it can be passive. I can provide here a couple of examples. I think, one thing too to mention is placing a heavy emphasis on onboarding processes in your teams, in your organizations. Starting building that connection from day one is important. Having, maybe automating your 30, 60, 90 day check-in and process and going from there, but other ways to automate the onboarding process is helpful. But if you don't have a new team, or if you're not adding new members to your team, maybe you do this beginning at a new quarter, maybe the approaching new year, you want to build out a check-in routine for your team or even for your organization. Or maybe you're more into the debrief feedback. So you want to set the tone there for asking others about feedback and maybe build that into your routine as well. Speaking of personal connections, getting to know each other on your team, I think is also important for managers to do. I recently heard on a podcast where there was a remote company who was doing their first one-on-ones with direct reports, and one manager had prepared a few slides and presented these during the one-on-one to her direct report to say, this is her daily schedule, this is her routine, these are her preferences, this is things that, stuff like that around her family and, what her day-to-day, week-to-week routine was. And then she gave the slides to the one-on-one and said, okay, next time we meet, you're going to present this to me and tell me, what's your daily schedule? What's your routine? What do you have going on? Things like that. So I thought that was a cool way to kind of set the tone and get to know each other on a personal level without that pressure of, just talking and having to explain all of that. So I thought that was a creative solution there. I think too, I'll mention, we have a few ways to get more creative too. With Poly, we have an always on Ask Me Anything open forum, which we've noticed is really good for distributed organizations in many time zones. So we've seen companies run this always on Poly when teams are distributed or on different multi-time zones, and all of, not everyone can attend a meeting live. And, then these frequent check-ins, hot takes, as we've mentioned, and then things like trivia, which I think you all have done some of that at a bucket list, trivia questions like movie, sports, and food, things like that.
Yes, for sure. And I love the part where it says have fun and mix in the light with the serious. We spend so much time with our coworkers and our peers that I think it's important to have fun and mix in that light with the seriousness.
For sure. Okay, so after investigating this question, about the remote office and running smoothly, we wanted to break down these 6 more tactical tips for leaders who are really navigating this world, some maybe for the first time. Again, these center a lot on trust, team cohesion, communication, and just building a relationship over time. So, number 1, frequent contact with your direct reports. This is kind of where that intentional communication, deliberate, thoughtful communication comes into play. Incorporating tools, don't be afraid to get creative, to have different lines of communication and different communication touches. Number 2, set up workflows to give you real-time data on emotional well-being on your team. Again, you can automate this daily, weekly, whatever works for your team. You can better determine how folks are doing and what blockers they're experiencing. And again, customize how you do this and what the cadence may be. Maybe you do a short check-in weekly, but then you do a longer check-in at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, something like that. Number 3, have a variety of engagement tools at your disposal. I think this is important, and people shouldn't be afraid to, go out there and try different things that might work for them. I think having more ways to encourage others to engage and share their thoughts and ideas is definitely a positive in a remote setting. Number 4, be more deliberate in communication tasks. This again came up in the chat, just maybe you're borderlining on over communication here. If what might be considered over communication in an in-office setting, might be necessary sometimes in a remote setting. And then, when a task is complete, there can be times when it just goes unnoticed. So I think you can build a habit around, when tasks are complete, make appreciation and recognition part of that culture, part of your feedback there to say, hey, you finished this, cool, we're on to the next, something like that. Give more feedback frequently. So I do suggest here leaders should really be more open about sharing their own mistakes, failures, lessons learned, providing examples of a time when, they might have been in a similar situation. I think that goes a long way. And then finally, number 6, set up systems to easily get updates on your team's work, build in, ways to connect there. This is the ongoing process, and it needs, maintenance and cultivation. Maybe your team is really into trivia. How can you incorporate trivia at the beginning of the week? Maybe your team is not so into check-ins daily, but yeah, maybe they're more of a weekly crew. Just, whatever works best for you. All right. So what can remote leaders do to positively impact communication and connection in their teams? So how does Poly and Bucket List come into play here for helping leaders achieve these goals? First, it's all about the layered communication approach with frequent touches, not all email, not all serious, but focusing on ways to communicate outside of the traditional day-to-day work routine. So I'll touch on the first 4 here, and then I'll let Erin get more into recognition on the next slide. I think, one of the biggest takeaways here that I want people to know about Poly is that Poly is not just for HR or people ops. Our use cases spread across organizations and are used by leaders and teams in a big variety of ways. So I'll highlight just a few here, but light touches, we see teams and organizations using Poly for these icebreakers, hot takes, team ice versus no ice is always a good one. You should see how that one goes with your teams. And then passive touches. This is the one we've really seen product engineering design leaders have great success using Poly. Maybe they're using it for daily stand-ups or check-ins, project progress, roadmap feedback. Some people or teams here in these departments work primarily asynchronously. It's not always easy for them to switch gears and jump into a Zoom for a one-on-one, but sometimes a light passive touch Poly solves for that. So you can get real-time data on how everyone's feeling and what they're working on without saying, hey, stop what you're doing, jump in this one-on-one and let's talk. Unstructured feedback. So we've really learned a lot and seen a lot from internal communications departments using Poly Open Forum, which is an always-on virtual suggestion box. So this is usually used in all sizes of organizations, but it's a way to submit questions anonymously and allows for a moderator to filter and then answer back in a public channel or a private DM. So I've also seen people ops teams using Poly for event planning. We in fact did this ourselves when we had an offsite back in May. And then number 4, metric bound EMPS is an example. This is more structured feedback. We've seen HR people ops teams use this for that exact question. And then, around other things like benefits feedback and onboarding workflows. So I'll hand it over now to you, Aaron.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, recognition is definitely a great tool that can help leaders improve communication and connection within their teams. Recognition is a tool that facilitates positive communication and human connections. Companies with recognition-rich cultures have 31% less voluntary turnover than companies that don't. 66% of workers are likely to leave their job if they're feeling unappreciated. And, perhaps there's some individuals in here that might even be able to resonate with that. Communication, enabling peer-to-peer recognition increases communication within the team. Communication also gives feedback as it shines a spotlight on desired behaviors and reinforces them. And when recognitions are tied to company core values, it's a great way to continuously communicate and remind people what the core values are. And in regards to connection, peer-to-peer recognition programs are also 11.5% more likely to impact engagement in the workplace. 82% of employees consider recognition an important part of their happiness at work. And recognition isn't just restricted to giving people shout outs for their work-related accomplishments. We can all celebrate personal milestones and goals together. And I'll pass this one back over to you, Deanna.
All right. Thanks, Aaron. Yes, I included a quote here from our CEO, Bilal. He's a remote manager himself, so he's faced some of these exact challenges. He's very familiar with the doorknob question. He's also a big proponent around communication, so he's big on including and using new tools and tactics to connect teams.
Love it. Big fan of quotes. All right, everyone, it's time to get your hot chocolate and cozy up with a fireside chat. I don't have any fireside sounds or popping sound effects for this though. So just imagine, a little fireplace in the background and getting all warm. We're going to start with this question here though. What strategies does your team use to build connections with each other in a remote workplace? And, if while we're asking these questions, feel free to populate something in the chat here, but for you, Deanna, what strategies does your team use to build connections with each other?
Yeah, we've done the donut chats before. We call them Poly Jam sessions. It's sort of a twist on traditional CEO office hours. So we all get together, our CEO might lead it off with a few things, and then we just kind of go into a discussion about, current topics. Sometimes it's random, no set agenda, maybe just a couple topics, and we kind of just have open discussion, around things.
I'm not sure if anyone's used Donut here too, but we use it at Bucket List as well, and it's quite fun. I enjoy the donut sessions that I have with individuals within our organization. Bucket List too, we also have weekly huddles to share personal work goals in smaller breakout groups, so that one, it helps us connect on a more personal level with individuals within the company. I see some chat responses here coming in, actually quite a bit. So again, totally appreciate the activity here in the chat, everyone. Let's see if we can pick something out here that stands out. Or I see themed days. So every week, Trivia Tuesday, Would You Rather Wednesday. I see another comment here. They set aside time to discuss topics that are not work related. I think that's great. Anything stand out here for you, Deanna?
Yeah, taking a look here. I do have a question about your breakout groups, Aaron. Are those random? Or are they by department, or how do you determine your groups?
Yeah, good question. So our HR leader on every Monday morning will receive a notification what the breakout group rooms are and who's in them. So like group 1, group 2, group 3, and there's usually about 5 to 8 people in each group. And then we know what our group assignment is, and we have a link, and then we all join that huddle and we spend 15 minutes together. On Monday, we'll set out personal goals and share those goals with everyone within that group. And then come Friday, we circle back. Hey, how'd you do with those goals, right? Oftentimes I'll hear someone say, oh, I want to drink more water, or this week I want to take the dog out for more walks. It's nice because you get to learn about people in a more personal way. And I feel connected to individuals who are in other parts of the company that I don't normally interact with.
Yeah, that's cool.
Let's see, anything else in here that this chat is just firing up. I like it. It's also important for employees to express their needs to the managers. Yeah, I see that there. Cool. Let's go to the next question. And again, as we move along these questions, feel free to respond with your own answers in the chat. So Deanna, what's a good way to debrief and pick up on those subtle cues that we talked about in a distributed environment?
Yeah, it can be tough, but maybe you have a colleague sit in on a call with you, maybe have them sit in on a meeting, that, maybe it's a sales call, and then you get their feedback right after, or maybe have them watch the recording, ask for their thoughts, feedback, ideas. Maybe you automate questions to go out after maybe like an all hands meeting, pretty light, not too many questions, something light, just to get, a quick feel for how people are feeling there.
I like it. I know that even at the start, when we kicked this off, we had a little music going, and I saw some people comment saying that they love having music as a way to kick things off. And, that's something that we do at Bucket List as well, just to get people like a little bit in the mood, take all that stress or anything that you're feeling. Another one, I think, and this is pretty obvious, but cameras off, cameras on, that's a pretty telling sign too, if someone's being engaged or disengaged. It's not always the case, but it is a telling sign. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah, for sure. For sure.
I'm curious too, as some companies, I don't know if it's mandatory, but they encourage participation with cameras on. Awesome. Let's go to the next question. How would you build and maintain trust with your direct reports and with other leaders? And I'll kick this one off here too. At Bucket List, we have weekly GSRs between managers and direct reports with specific questions that dig deep into what's going on. These questions generate good discussion. It promotes openness. There's questions that ask how managers can improve to support reports. We actually will rate how our managers doing, rate in that report as well. Having that as a weekly question can be empowering and normalize these types of discussions as well. I actually look forward to my weekly GSRs with my manager. I love sharing. One of the questions that's on there is, what's gone well? What's one of the things that's just gone well this week? It can be personal. It can be a business goal. Like for example, when my kids are playing hockey, if one of them scores a goal, it's a great platform for me to share that with him.
Yep. Yeah, we do something kind of similar in our leadership meeting, and then in some of our stand-ups, we go around the horn and just go over what's everyone jazzed about. So it can be personal, it can be professional. Yeah, it could be my son, making a penalty kick at this game, or it can be something work related. But we always go through, what are you jazzed about?
Penalty kicks. I'm excited. That's what a normal soccer score is. What, like 1-0?
Yeah.
That's totally coming from a hockey comment here. So something else we do at Bucket List too, like checking in outside of scheduled meetings, taking an interest in interest, right? It's so important to understand the people that we work with, maybe the hobbies that they're interested in, the extracurricular commitments, things outside of work, because they do influence what happens in work. And to show that you just generally care about who they are and what they're interested in. Ask how their weekend went. At Bucket List, we have a bucket list benefit that always generates good conversations. And that's where we learn a lot about people.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Awesome. All right. So some key takeaways. Overall, remote managers and workers are satisfied with their working relationships, but agree remote work requires more communication methods. Remote workers seek additional tools and forms of communication to increase team trust and cohesiveness. Here comes, Deanna, that word, incorporate spontaneity.
Yep, there it is.
All right. When Deanna and I were, kind of reviewing some of the slides, I just could not say that word for some reason. So that was my biggest hurdle in this webinar. And of course, lightness in the workplace with communication, mix up the seriousness and fun and be creative. Consider using recognition as a tool to strengthen communication and connection within your teams. All right, so we are going to get into our first poll question. So, we're always looking for ways to improve in our webinars, and we'd love to gather some feedback from all of you. If you have one great takeaway so far from the session, then I feel like the time's been well spent. Just give me a moment here. I'm going to pop open poll question. Here we go. So also feel free to share in the chat, which topics resonated the most with you today. Feel free to engage with us in the chat as well. I'm going to leave this poll open just for a little bit here. But again, if there's one takeaway that you found here, we feel like we've done our part here for you all. I'll just give this a few more seconds. Appreciate the responses, everybody. Awesome. All right, I'm going to end the poll I'm going to count it down, maybe from 10. Now I'll go to 5, and we'll go down to 3, 2, 1, and we'll end this one. Awesome. And any comments here about what's resonated with you all most today in the chat? Unstructured feedback was an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
Recognition is crucial. Yes, it is. And recognition is just mostly an expansion on just saying thanks. So like anytime you say thanks, what are you saying thanks for? And expand on that and like just let people know what it's all about. Perfect. And for those of you interested in learning more and would like some help about building amazing cultures with rewards and a recognition program, this webinar was brought to you by Bucket List Rewards, the #1 ranked recognition and rewards program in customer satisfaction and ease of use. We're very passionate and can help find solutions to lowering turnover, recognizing amazing work, and bring your staff together by breaking down those company silos. Much like I mentioned before, like connecting with the dev team, who I don't normally get to connect with. We built some awesome programs with all sizes of organizations, including some cool brands like you can see here. So if you're interested, I'm going to pop open another poll here. And if you'd like to learn more and would like some help around these best practices, feel free to let us know by just selecting that you'd be interested. So give me a moment here while I pop open this next one. Awesome. Yeah, if you're curious to speaking with someone at Bucket List, we'd love to speak with you. I'm going to leave this open for a little moment too, because we do have a lot of individuals still kicking around here. We've got a few minutes left and we are almost wrapping up. See if I can see if there's some other comments here. Becoming a trusted leader, top 3 challenges of manning remotely. Nice. Building better connections and trust. Awesome. Anything standing out here for you, Deanna, in the comments?
Yeah, that unstructured feedback, that was definitely an interesting one for me too, when I kind of, wrap my head around it a little bit more. And yeah, the takeaways about the challenges for managers.
And I'm going to be ending the poll now. So thank you for that, Deanna. All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. And of course, Deanna, over to you about Poly.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think I too saw a question about where is Poly? Poly is in Microsoft Teams, Slack, and Zoom. So we are all about driving team engagement and building culture. Feedback is one of our main drivers, but feedback of all kinds. So whether it's instant feedback, the virtual suggestion box, unstructured feedback, all hands Q&A, even interactive meeting feedback, pulse surveys, or daily or weekly check-ins. We really aim to help our customers engage, connect, and strengthen their remote cultures. So you can learn more on our website. There's also going to be a QR code at the end of the presentation. You can always reach out to me too on LinkedIn. But I think Erin's going to do another poll here on Poly. And again, let us know if you want to talk to one of our product specialists. We can certainly give you information on what we do and how we can help you, and show you all the things that Poly has to offer.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to leave this poll up for a little bit as well, just so I can take some time to catch up on some of these awesome chats that we have going on. We had a great group today, and we've got a few more minutes together. It's been nice and warm and cozy. For us here, it's a cool fall day up here near Toronto. All right, I'm going to leave it open for a few more seconds. I see the responses trickling in here, so we are almost finished with that. Awesome. I'm going to end the poll in 3, 2, 1. Appreciate that, everybody. Thank you. And as a result of participating today, as we mentioned at the start of this webinar, you're all going to earn the following credits from HRCI and SHRM. For those calling in, this event is being recorded, which will allow you to pick up the credits at your own convenience. I'm just going to pause for a moment here. So if you want to take down those ID numbers, feel free to write them down. Again, this webinar will be posted later. Let's give some individuals time to write those down. Perfect. And that brings us to the end. Just want to, again, thank everybody again for all the engagement, the participation. It's been a lot of fun, Deanna. It's been a pleasure, going through this session with you, and totally appreciate the participation here from everybody.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And as Deanna mentioned, there are some QR codes up here. So if you want to engage with us further, feel free to scan one of those QR codes to further engage with us. Find us on LinkedIn. We love connecting with like-minded individuals, or if you're curious and want to carry any of these conversations over a little bit further, we're easy to find on LinkedIn. I believe we use these same photos on LinkedIn.
Probably.
Yeah. And, one of the things that for me is one of the biggest takeaways here is the subtle cues. I can't say enough that even in just day-to-day life, we should always be looking for those subtle cues because people are giving them.
Sure, for sure.
I'm going to pop into the Q&A here because I see that we do have one. So let me just have a look at this. Okay, Deanna, how do you get your organization to actually participate in some of the things that have been mentioned here? This individual here mentions that they're lean and busy. So at times their lunch and learns virtually happy hours do not always draw big crowds. Any tips on maybe how to lure more individuals to participate?
Yeah, that's tricky. I think one of the biggest tips I have is it starts at the top. So, sometimes getting buy-in from leadership to attend some of those, even if they can't attend the whole thing, but show up, show face, that might help trickle down to get more folks participating. But yeah, that's a tricky one.
It is, but I appreciate the question. I have a question here though. Does Poly integrate with all platforms?
So Poly is on Slack, Microsoft Teams, and then Zoom.
Awesome. And how do you do the Motivation Monday incentives?
Motivation Monday incentives, like trivia questions.
Yeah.
maybe even a check-in. And sometimes a check-in can be a custom question about maybe a follow-up on a personal thing that that they have going on.
Perfect. And again, for everyone that's still here, we appreciate all your time. We're going to give you a couple minutes back here as we've run the course. It's been a lot of fun, and just want to thank everybody again, and of course yourself, Deanna.